Hey guys, welcome back to another video here on Toned In Entertainment, where we love pop culture. Today, it's time for another comic book review as we get ready to step inside the squared circle and take a look at a new series from AWA Upshot. Now, will this series be demoted to jobber status, or is it destined for the gold? Well, let's get on with my comic book review for The Crimson Cage, issue number 1. The story is going to take place in 1984, where wrestling territories were a huge deal, and the main character of this issue is professional wrestler Chuck Frenzy. Now, he's kind of the big dog, at least in his territory down in New Orleans, but him and his woman / Valet Sharlene have big dreams of making it out of their local LPW or Louisiana Pro Wrestling and making it to the big leagues. Now, throughout this story, we're going to see writer John Lees have no issue giving us insight as to what really goes on behind the scenes of a wrestling show and how the pro wrestlers work so hard to not be seen with one another, as especially back in the 80s, you didn't want to break the illusion of all your hard work you put in the ring and making it appear that you really wanted to rip each other apart, all be thrown out the window, only to be seen in public later that night knocking down beers together. Now, while this comic at its core is about a professional wrestler looking toward a brighter future, it does come with a sci-fi horror twist when Chuck is greeted by some spirit in the bayou who tells him that championship gold is in his near future. Now, coming to town is a promotion called the GWA, and they're going to be doing cross promotion with LPW. Now, their big faction is a group called the Crown Jewels, essentially their version of the Four Horsemen that is led by the GWA heavyweight champion Van Emerald. During the event, there's some really good build up to what will be a heavyweight title match between Van Emerald and Chuck Frenzy. Now, while the fans are hot for these two to throw it down, we see that after creating a ruckus in the ring, Chuck Frenzy will be out styling and profiling with the Crown Jewels in the town that same night. Now, earlier in this issue, there was a conversation between Chuck and Sharlene where essentially she tells him that being a good guy hasn't got him nowhere and that he will never make it to the top. And if he gets an opportunity to take a cheap shot, he definitely should. And after a night of partying and walking down a dark street, Chuck will have the opportunity to push his way to the top. But during a conversation, Van Emerald will tell him that he really believes that Chuck will be the next big thing and has a game plan to put him over in their match to make sure he does. Now, as I was reading this comic, I was really getting that vibe of back to 1990 at the Great American Bash, where Ric Flair was helping Sting elevate to main event status. But instead here in this comic, it's more of a Montreal screwjob, where we see Van Emerald do something so bad to Chuck's career, there might not be any coming back for it, and it might actually earn Van Emerald the title Dirtiest Player in the Game. As this issue wraps up, Chuck is really going to get an earful from Sharlene, as she's going to be extremely peeved that once again he didn't take her advice, and that while being a good guy all this time has been good enough to keep his career stagnant, this time the damage that has been done might be irreversible. That is, unless he's willing to give in to the dark side. Now, as I was writing this review, I was really going back and forth between two number scores, and I was almost going to give this issue a 9 out of 10. But as I reread this issue a second time, this issue is freaking fantastic. It is really great. And as a fan of professional wrestling and comics, I think issue number 1 of The Crimson Cage gets a much deserved 10 out of 10. Now, being a professional wrestling fan, I went into this with some reservations, but writer John Lees really won me over with issue number 1 that has me wanting to get a front row seat when issue number 2 releases on January 19th. Now, in addition to the great story, the artwork is also awesome, whether it's inside the squared circle, taking us behind the curtain, or taking us on a psychedelic trip in the bayou of Louisiana. Artist Alex Cormack and colorist Ashley Cormack really do a great job of bringing this story to life. Now, I have a feeling after getting played like a puppet, Chuck will definitely be seeking revenge on the champ, and I'm really curious as to what the consequences will be when he does. Alright guys, well, that's going to wrap up my comic book review for The Crimson Crimson Cage issue number 1. Now, if you read this issue, what are your thoughts? Comment down below. I think even if you're not a fan of pro wrestling, there's still a really fun read to be had here. And if you are a fan of pro wrestling, especially from back in the 80s and the 90s, I think this is a must read. Now, I did buy the digital version of this comic on Comixology because essentially I don't have a comic book store near me anymore, but I do want to buy a physical copy and really own issue number 1 of the Crimson Cage. Now guys, I will be covering issue number 2 here on the channel. So guys, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can stay tuned in here to Toned In Entertainment for future videos.
Subscribe to the channel. Do it. Go now. Do it now.